Not every family party is about joy. Some are about watching where you stand without anyone needing to say it directly. My name is Taryn. I am 27 years old, and the night of my brother's promotion party was the first time I understood how easily respect can disappear when it is spoken about without kindness. I watched my father stand up slowly, holding his glass, smiling in a way that looked proud, but felt cold. His voice carried across the room without hesitation. I am proud of what Thomas has become. He represents success, discipline, consistency, everything a family wishes for. People around us nodded. A few smiled wider. Then he looked around the room, paused for a moment, and added with a softer but sharper tone, "Not everyone manages to live up to that level." That silence was not empty. It was aimed. My brother did not miss the moment. I saw his mouth curl into a smile before he turned his head toward me. He leaned forward slightly, enjoying every second, and said clearly so everyone could hear, "Are you the one he means? Or should I make it easier for everyone in here?" The room reacted instantly. Laughter was loud, careless, and fast. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. I looked straight back at him and replied calmly, "Give me 30 minutes. You'll understand everything." Then I walked out. The next morning, my cousin sent me a message that said she could not believe what happened after I left. If this story feels familiar to you, tap like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what you would do in my place. Back when I still shared the same walls with them, life inside our home followed quiet rules that no one ever needed to explain, because everyone already knew exactly who mattered and who blended into the background, and I understood my place long before I could put language to how it felt. My brother Thomas was never announced as the priority, but every important decision somehow bent naturally in his direction without anyone needing to discuss it openly. When plans were made, his schedule shaped them. When conversations turned serious, his voice held weight. When something had to be chosen, the choice seemed to arrive before anyone asked for my opinion. I noticed it early, although I never spoke about it, because speaking would have meant turning a silent truth into something uncomfortable for everyone else, and discomfort was treated like a problem that needed to be erased rather than understood. Mom carried herself like peace was the highest goal in our home. She rarely argued. She rarely challenged. Instead, she smoothed over moments, softened tones, redirected tension away from the person who caused it, usually toward the person who could handle silence better. I learned which parts of myself were welcome, which parts needed to stay hidden, which words should be swallowed before they reached the surface. Over time, I stopped offering ideas unless someone asked directly, because offering them freely only made the quiet in the room feel heavier. Dad valued calm above everything, but his version of calm meant avoiding conflict rather than solving it, which made it easier to let things stay unspoken than to risk turning a pattern into an argument. I understood quickly that pushing back did not change outcomes, it only changed the temperature in the room, and I was always the one expected to cool it down. I adjusted without protest, not because I agreed, but because survival inside that home depended on knowing when silence was safer than truth, and when truth only created distance instead of understanding. I grew familiar with being the one who listened while decisions moved past me, with being the one who nodded while stories were told without my input, with being the one who adapted instead of being considered. It did not feel cruel in a loud way. It felt subtle. It felt normal. It felt like the air of the house, something that wrapped around you so quietly that you did not realize how tightly it was holding your breath, until even breathing felt like something that needed permission. Over time, I stopped expecting to be included and started expecting to understand things from a distance. I became good at observing tone shifts, facial changes, small pauses, learning how to exist by reading what was never said out loud. That role did not arrive through an argument or a clear moment. It formed slowly through repetition, until I realized that participating was never something I was trained to do, only watching, only adjusting, only staying quiet enough to remain unnoticed. The tension in our home never exploded. It stretched quietly across years, never loud enough to break the walls, but strong enough to teach me exactly where I was allowed to stand and how small my space was meant to be. A few weeks before the party, my life shifted in a way that never showed on the surface because nothing collapsed, nothing exploded. Yet a quiet truth began to separate what I believed from what was actually real. My best friend Jordan worked near systems that occasionally brushed against corporate records. Although we had always kept a clear line between friendship and professional boundaries, because neither of us wanted our loyalty to turn into something dangerous. That evening felt different because Jordan arrived without jokes, without distractions, carrying a kind of calm seriousness that settled into the room before any words appeared. We sat side by side in silence for a while, not in fear, not in shock, but in quiet understanding that something heavy was about to be placed between us. Jordan explained that internal financial records connected to the company where Thomas worked had surfaced inside a routine system process that was never designed to expose more than controlled summaries. What appeared in those files did not feel like an accident or a misunderstanding. The structure showed deliberate adjustments designed to create a polished picture for anyone watching from the outside. Reports that should have shown losses were carefully reclassified. Timelines were shifted with precision. Project results were presented as growth, even when the internal reality reflected strain that outside investors would never have tolerated if they had known the truth. I remained silent, not because I felt nothing, but because I felt too much too quickly to waste it on noise. Jordan went further, showing me patterns that stretched backward over time, revealing that this was not a single bad decision or a moment of pressure, but a habit built slowly and protected carefully. This was not panic-driven behavior. This was systematic control. This was a process of burying losses beneath rehearsed confidence while presenting fragile performance as stability. I understood that behavior like this does not survive alone, which told me that silence was not just passive, it was collaborative, shared, protected by people who benefited from the illusion. Then came the detail that changed how I understood everything. Jordan showed me that the project that brought Thomas recognition did not begin in his hands. The foundation, the logic, the structure came from a colleague working beside him. That original work moved quietly through shared drafts, internal discussions, early concepts, until ownership softened without open conflict. Documents changed slowly over time. Presentation files adjusted language. Credit shifted in subtle ways until Thomas appeared more frequently than any other name, while the original creator disappeared without protest or public defense. I did not feel rage in the usual way. I did not feel betrayal in the usual way. What formed instead was a cold, steady clarity that settled where confusion used to live. Jordan reached for my hand once without pressure, without instructions, offering nothing more than acknowledgement. That support lasted only seconds, then ended completely. After that night, Jordan stepped away from the secret, returning to a normal presence in my life, without trying to guide my feelings or influence my decisions. That role did not repeat. That moment did not return. I chose silence deliberately and with purpose, because speaking too early would have protected the wrong people while exposing the wrong parts of myself. Silence stopped feeling like something forced on me and became something I shaped myself. I began observing patterns without visible reaction. I collected small behavioral details without making them known. I watched language, timing, reactions, pauses, all without giving away what I had learned. Nothing around me appeared different to anyone else yet. Inside, I was building something steady, careful, quiet, preparing for a moment that was not yet visible. That evening in San Diego was wrapped in a perfect surface, with soft lighting, polished crystal glasses, controlled smiles, calculated laughter, and a space carefully constructed to celebrate success while hiding anything that did not fit the image they wanted to present to the world. It was the first time I stepped into a space like that, while Thomas was already surrounded by people eager to touch his shoulder, shake his hand, hold his attention, as though standing close to him made their own lives feel more valuable in the eyes of others. The scent of expensive perfume moved lightly through the air, the warmth from freshly served food spread across the room. Polished wooden surfaces reflected the light, while ambition quietly filled every corner of the space, disguised by conversations that sounded polite but carried very little truth. Mom stood near the center of the room holding a straight posture, her eyes steady, her expression of pride maintained naturally, while Dad stood beside her, a glass in his hand, his gaze moving across the crowd with satisfaction, hidden beneath his familiar calm. Someone gently tapped a glass, a sound soft enough not to break the atmosphere, but clear enough to draw the attention of the entire room, causing conversations to slowly fade as eyes turned toward the center where the most anticipated moment was about to unfold. Dad was the one who spoke, his voice low, clear, steady enough to travel across the room without needing to be raised. "We're so proud of Thomas, not like someone who always fails." Mom nodded slightly beside him, her smile unchanged, her eyes never wavering, as if everything just said was something obvious that did not require reflection. Thomas did not react immediately. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not in a friendly way, but with a carefully restrained expression of mockery. He turned to look at me slowly, his gaze sharp and calm, carrying a sense of control, as if only two people existed in that crowded room. He spoke slowly, each word clear, without needing to raise his voice. "Is that person you?" The whole room burst out laughing. It was not the kind of laughter born from discomfort or surprise, but a relaxed, careless sound full of the assumption that cruelty was a natural part of the atmosphere here. Crystal glasses tilted gently, shoulders shook, a stray clap echoed somewhere, as if this moment deserved approval rather than being questioned. From another corner of the room, a voice rose loudly enough to be heard. "Maybe she should finally prove she's not just a shadow." The sound in the room dropped lower, small whispers appeared, eyes began to shift, no longer avoiding, no longer hiding, as if everyone wanted to watch the way I would break. Thomas leaned slightly toward me, his voice lowered, not because he feared being heard, but because he wanted to sharpen his words. "You won't do anything. You never do." I kept my gaze steady. I did not raise my voice. I did not look away. I did not allow any emotional reflex to surface, because silence had become something I used like armor over many years. I answered clearly, calmly, "In 30 minutes, you'll know the answer." I gave no further explanation, no defense, no tears, no arguments with anyone, because what was about to happen did not require the approval of a room that was only used to laughing at the pain of others. I turned my back, walked past tables that were still untouched, past wineglasses that had not reached any lips, past eyes that followed every step I took, without a single person brave enough to stop me, while my breathing remained even, as if everything was already under control. Outside, the night air felt clearer than anything inside that room had been, colder, more real and quiet enough for me to hear my own footsteps without needing to hide or adjust anything. 20 minutes later, everything inside me had changed. As I sat alone in the car, the engine still warm beneath the hood, the noise of the city sealed away by the thick glass around me, while my hands rested on the steering wheel without shaking, even though my mind was no longer willing to accept being made smaller for another second inside silence. The air inside the car grew heavier, not from fear, but from something very old, finally fracturing under the weight of too many years. My thoughts no longer moved in straight lines. Memories returned in broken order, not like a film, but like flashes of light. A dinner table where my voice was ignored. A living room where laughter belonged to someone else. A phone call I never received. A compliment I never heard. Moments piled on top of each other without warning, without shouting, without noise, but heavy enough to make breathing feel like a deliberate act. For the first time, I understood something with painful clarity. Nothing would change if I did not change myself. This was not a moment of anger. This was not revenge forming inside my chest. This was awareness. If I stayed quiet, the cycle would continue. If I stood still, I would keep shrinking. If I waited for respect, I would grow old, waiting for something never meant for me. My hands moved before I allowed myself to hesitate. I reached for my phone and made a call. My assistant Claire answered on the second ring with the calm presence that had always made me feel steady, the kind of presence that never asked unnecessary questions and never filled silence with panic. For a brief moment, I listened to my own breathing through the speaker, realizing how steady it sounded even though everything inside me had just awakened. Claire did not waste time offering comfort.